everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Brittany DeFilly. I'm the Educational and Outreach Coordinator here at Verteks. Today we're going to have Mike DeFilly presenting a Mitel Contact Center training webinar. He's going to go over some call queuing options, some announcements, and scripting. So we'll go ahead and kick it off to Mike. It's all yours.
All right. Thank you, honey. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Like my beautiful wife said, my name is Mike DeFilly. One of the lead voice engineers here at Verteks. And, today I wanted to talk a little bit with you guys about contact center, obviously, but a little bit of a break from the last couple of these I've done, which were a little more kind of admin feature focused. I wanted to kind of make the topic of this webinar a little more focused on some particular scenarios, so something maybe a little more real world for you. My thought for this is kind of, the queue experience, right? One of the major features of a contact center system like ECC is its ability to queue calls and present options to callers while they're waiting. Things like, your estimated wait time, your queue position, potentially give them a callback option, different kinds of other diversions, even like marketing messages, other things like that, that can be presented to the callers while they're waiting to speak with an agent. For our webinar today, I wanted to dig in to that kind of queue experience and show you guys how we can actually use some of the things we talked about before, like the announcements and GCCS scripts, how you can actually implement these on your own system, and the real, how get into the nitty gritty of how we actually do that. So announcements. So these are actually the kind of core way that we implement these features. Announcements are all configured at the ECC service level. In ECC, there's a kind of 4 key components that make up kind of a queue from start to finish. We have what we call the IRN, which is the number that directs into the queue. We have the service, which is kind of like the queue itself. And then we have groups and individual agents who are members of those groups. So the announcements belong to the service, which you can kind of think of as the queue itself. They can be as simple as something like a short voice recording, maybe a little announcement, informational message, but we can do even more complex things with these, like anything that we can do in the GCCS scripting engine can be an announcement, or technically they are all GCCS scripts, and the announcement is a script. And we can do some really interesting and powerful things with that using the announcement system. And of course, all announcements are scripts. And to show you a little screenshot of where these are in Contact Center Director, you'll find it in Favorites under Services, and it's the second tab next to General. It says Announcements. Now, we've got 3 types of announcements that we can attach to a service. The first one is what we call a mandatory announcement. And essentially what this is basically the mandatory announcement is going to be a script that runs, and generally for a mandatory announcement, this is going to be some sort of audio notification in many cases. And this is something like an announcement that will play anytime a caller enters that queue, regardless of whether their call is going to be queued or not. As an example, this would be where I would implement a notification for call recording in a call center if you wanted to do it here, because this is going to play every time a caller gets to this queue. It's going to play this mandatory announcement. That's why we call it mandatory. It's always going to be played to the caller anytime they enter this particular queue. Our second type of announcement is what we call a first announcement. The first announcements play if a caller is going to be queued, but it will not play if there is an agent available and the call can be routed directly to that agent. So this would be generally the place where we would put some sort of comfort message. So if you say, thank you for continuing to hold, all of our agents are currently assisting other customers, something like that. If you wanted to have a short comfort message, if a caller is about to be queued, you would put it in the first announcement position. And it's ideal to put it there because, again, it's not going to play if they're going to reach an agent right away. So obviously, we don't want to play, the message saying your call is being queued if it's not. And that's the purpose of the first announcement. And then finally, our last announcement type is what we call secondary announcements. Now, secondary announcements, you can have more than one. And these are ones that play while the caller is waiting in the queue. And generally, you'll have one or more than one. And these will repeat kind of on a timer while the caller is waiting in the queue. And this would be where we would offer things like a callback option, estimated wait time, queue position. If you wanted to give someone an option to leave a message or potentially divert to another group or team, maybe even another call center queue, this would be where we would present those options. They'll play kind of in a loop through a timer, and there are a few other settings there we'll get to in a second. But this would be where we could do that. Also, marketing messages. If you did have messages that you wanted to interrupt your kind of basic music on hold stream occasionally and play some little informational or marketing messages, secondary announcements would be where we do that. All right, and just to show you guys here, I went ahead and brought up our own system, and I'll just get logged in here. And again, we're looking at services and just to give you a better idea of kind of what's on the announcements tab here, the interface here. So again, we have up top the mandatory announcement, and of course a checkbox to turn that on or off. A drop down here that lets us select the script we want to use, and we'll look at these in a second and show you how to actually program these scripts for specific scenarios. And then right under that, we have a time after mandatory. So this is the number of seconds it's going to wait before proceeding to the next announcement. So for instance, if I had a first announcement here also, if I wanted to wait, a few seconds before playing that first announcement, I could enter, 5 seconds here in this time after mandatory. In that case, the caller is going to enter the queue. The mandatory announcement is going to play immediately. It'll wait 5 seconds, and then it's going to play the first announcement. So just to give you some clarity on these timers here. First announcement, similar to mandatory, we can select a single script here to play. And then below the first announcement, we have our settings and secondary announcements. One of the things you can notice here for the secondary announcements, we have a few options for that cycling behavior. Kind of the most common and popular is the cycle all, where if I had, multiple scripts defined here, it'll basically start at the first one and kind of work its way down through that list of announcements and then start back over at the top once we reach the end. Cycle last will actually go through the configured list of secondary announcements, but it'll hold on the final configured announcement, and it will only repeat that particular announcement multiple times there. Don't find a whole lot of use for that one. In fact, I don't think I've ever configured anyone with a cycle last secondary announcement configuration. And then our final one is no cycle. In that case, it'll just go from top to bottom here, one pass through the secondary announcements, and will not repeat any secondary announcements again in the future. And of course, the actual secondary announcements window here at the bottom, you'll notice I have the option to configure more than one announcement here, so we can have multiple scripts here configured. And we've got the similar sort of interface, again, a timer that specifies how long we're going to wait before we play the next item here in the announcements window. The only, I guess, comment I make about that is just make sure that you got these times right, especially if you're doing a cycle all or cycle last. Just remember that these are the time after the one you're configuring. So in this case, it's going to immediately play the sample second announcement, wait 5 seconds, then play option 2 here, wait 5 seconds, then option 3. Sometimes these timers can be a little too short or too long inadvertently. So something to pay attention to when you're setting these up. So As far as some of the different options we have available to us in the scripting engine, obviously our most simple option is a voice announcement. This is a simple sort of, just like you have with an auto attendant, simple voice announcement stating, some sort of comfort message, some piece of information, just a simple, basically a WAV file. These WAV files do have to be in a specific format. If you're familiar with the Mitel system, the ShoreTel before it, that when you're like working with the music on hold or importing auto attendant announcements, we have this specific WAV file format. The ECC system shares that same format. So it's this 8-bit mono ULAW encoded file. You can, of course, convert an existing WAV file to match this format. My recommendation, though, if you're just going to be recording one of these on your own system, the easiest way to record these is actually just to leave it as a voicemail in the system. So if I'm making one of these, I'll actually dial my own extension and leave myself a voicemail that's the content of the announcement I want to play. And then actually using the Connect client, we can save that voicemail as a WAV file, and we can use that WAV file as the announcement file for contact center. These WAV files do have to be located in a specific folder on the contact center server for them to be visible in the script editor. We'll show you that here in a second. But as an example, usually that folder is going to be, your program files directory, the directory where the contact center is installed. That's usually ShoreTel Contact Center Server. And in a system, all of our newer systems running Connect, you'll see there's kind of 3 folders here. There's an IVR folder /0, and then another IVR folder. This is a folder structure change that Mitel made to make the system multi-tenant for the cloud stuff. But in any premise system, it'll always be IVR 0 IVR. So to show you here in the script editor, we'll go back to our server here. Again, all these announcements are scripts, and these scripts are built using the GCCS scripting engine. So the Connect Graphical Call Control Scripts Administration here. That's a mouthful, which I already have up. And again, a little refresher from last time. So in these scripts, essentially everything starts up here at the arrow. So this is my start position. And I essentially have a palette or menu of different options that I can program here in the script editor. So for a simple voice announcement, what I'm going to do is actually choose this play file option. So when I click on that, it's going to give me this little play file icon here. And this will give me down here in the bottom pane a space where I can essentially just pick the file I want. So properties for play file, I have predefined file name selected. If I click the little ellipses button here, it'll open a browse dialog. And in this dialog, you'll notice the root here, it's not like my C drive or anything, it's this IVR folder. So this is as far up as we can go in the browse dialog for accessing WAV files we want to use here. So if you're looking for a WAV file and you can't find it, just make sure it's in the IVR folder on your contact center server. Now here we can select from a bunch of different files. Obviously, I could bring in my own WAV files here. There are a number of pre-configured files here for certain options, particularly the callback option. We have some pre-recorded announcements for us there. In this case, I'm not too worried about the particular one here. I'm just going to pick one of these WAV files here. And so now we can see that the path to that file is populated here. And then what we would need to do to make this work is if I hover over my little green start button here, you'll see a little red star icon shows up if my mouse is just over the tip of that. When that shows up, I click and hold down my left mouse button. I drag this line over to the play file action here. And now I've actually made this script operational. Unless this start button is connected to an action, the script isn't actually going to work for you. And this is all I need to do a basic voice announcement. I have the action connected here. I've got a WAV file I'm playing. There are some other options here for the file. We usually don't have to worry about these too much for just a single WAV file. So you can ignore these for a simple option. And then what I'll do here up top, I just hit save script. And now it's saved. Oh, I did forget to rename it. To rename it, you actually click in the script list. If I double click on the name here where it says script 50, it'll actually give me a space there to rename it. I'll resave that again. There we go. So now I have a script called Simple Voice Announcement. And if I go back to Contact Center Director here, I'm going to click off this page and back onto it. You can see that new script. Go into my test service here, announcements. For instance, if this is going to be a mandatory announcement, I can just say enabled. The script is Simple Voice Announcement. And we can save that. And there we go. So now I have a mandatory voice announcement configured and active on this test queue in my case. All right. Minimize you. There we go. All right. So another popular option for queue handling that we do through these scripts and announcements are queue position and wait time. So other times we might want to, occasionally present to the caller, or maybe when they first enter the queue, give them maybe their queue position or estimated wait time. This would be something that you could configure potentially as a first announcement, or usually more often as a secondary announcement. I also have here the wait time formula in case you're curious. So the way that Contact Center calculates that wait time, it's the average treatment time, which treatment time is basically your real number for the time it takes for a call. That's going to include ring time on the agent's phone, talk time, any time that the caller was placed on hold, and then that time ends when the call is hung up. So treatment time is kind of your real callings time. We multiply that by the caller's position in queue. So let's say if your average talk time or treatment time for a call was 30 seconds, I was the second person in queue, it's going to give me 60 seconds worth of wait time there. And then that number is going to be divided by the number of agents you have working on that service that are not in a release state. So let's say I might have 5 agents logged in, but 3 of them are released and on a break. In that case, I'm going to be dividing that by 2, and my average queue time in this case is actually still going to be 30 seconds. So that'll be the number that gets announced to the caller. One other thing to note about that wait time calculation is that it's for the numbers it's using to build that, it's looking at what we call the current interval. This is another piece of information that can be defined in the Contact Center Director. But usually it's 30 minutes. Aside from these calculations, it's used for some other things in reporting and real-time statistics. But generally speaking, by default, if that interval hasn't been changed, it's going to be 30 minutes. And that's where the data is going to be coming from to create that wait time formula over the past 30 minutes. We have seen cases where sometimes, especially if you have some very busy times of day, in your call center, where you can have sort of a rapid increase or decrease in the number of calls kind of within a 30-minute window, it can make this wait time formula seem out of whack. And in those cases, I usually recommend increasing or decreasing, kind of as the need may be, that interval time. So we're working with either a larger or smaller set of data to make that more accurate. So to show you guys how we'll set up those announcements, I'll go back to our server here. And going back to the script editor, what I'll do is I'll create another new script here. And I'll go ahead and give it a name now. Now it's wait time, right? And so for wait time and queue position, we actually have two special actions in our palette here that handle that for us. So if I wanted to announce a caller's place in queue, I actually have an action called announce place in queue. And we can click on that guy here, and we'll go ahead and link him up to my arrow. And a couple things to note about this one. So there are two blank fields here for file to play start, file to play end. Basically, all that this action does when you configure it, if I were not to put anything here, it's just going to say a number when it's invoked. So if I were to leave it configured like this and put it into my call center, when it goes to play, it's not going to say your queue position is 2. It's just going to say 2. So if we want to put some sort of preamble in front of that to say, you know, your queue position is this file to play start, we need to configure or pick something there. You do have the option of recording your own version of that. Fortunately, Mitel's actually provided us a pre-recorded preamble for this, and you can find that here in this, in our case, excuse me, this US folder. So we have some different folders here for different languages. They do provide these canned recordings in a number of different languages for us. So I'm going to go to the English version, and if I go to sample here, you'll see this WAV file called place in queue. This is actually the preamble we can use for this announce place in queue. So if I use this sample place in queue, this is actually the you know, your queue position is, and then it'll actually announce their place in queue. They do also have an option to include a kind of postscript here, a file to play after it's done playing the place in queue. We usually don't configure this, but if you did have something specific you wanted to say, maybe another little comfort message saying, you know, we know your call is important, thank you for continuing to hold, something like that, we can also attach that to the end of the queue position announcement. Finally, one last little trick we have here with the queue position announcement is this offset. We can actually configure a fudge number here where we'll actually tell the person that their queue position is higher than it actually is in reality. We don't do this often, but the reason for this is if you have a queue where you are mixing caller priorities. So for instance, if I were doing something a little more advanced, let's say I have a single queue, maybe I'm looking at different callers coming into this queue and I'm deciding that some of these callers are higher priority than others. So in that case, I might be reaching into this queue and making some callers higher priority. And in that case, I'm actually going to be bumping people out of the way in the queue position. And, you know, obviously what we don't want to have happen in that case is suddenly, you know, you've got a person who's called in, you know, they're number 2 in queue. This queue position announcement goes to play 30 seconds later, and all of a sudden they're number 5 in queue. Well, you know, they're going to be pretty angry about that. So the way that we can handle that situation in a mixed priority service is we can actually use this offset to kind of pre-increase their queue position for them, where we'll actually offset that. So we'll tell them that they're actually 3rd in queue when really they might be 1st, just in case we have any higher priority people that might come in and potentially bump them out of the way. My preference in programming is I try to avoid mixed priority queues. I'll usually just send the call to a completely different high priority queue in that case, so we don't end up in a situation where we have to use this fudge factor. And of course, similar to our queue position announcement, or you call this announce wait time, we do have an actual wait time announcement, which I'll actually put in here. You'll also notice I can right click here in the white space and I have access to that palette here, which I can also get by clicking an icon here over the script list. Just want to show you our announce wait time action here. Basically similar to the queue position in that I have, again, my file to play at start, file to play at end. Again, I have a fudge factor we can use for the time. And also we can choose what kind of resolution we want here for the time. Again, we do have a sample file that's provided for us. We don't have to record a file right out of the box. So this one is called a waiting time.wave. And then again, same thing we talked about with the queue position, our fudge factor. Resolution will give us, again, just the nearest number we're going to round to here. So we can provide, up to the nearest 10 seconds. We can provide up to the nearest 30 seconds or up to 60 seconds. I usually recommend, actually, for most cases, 60 seconds is generally enough, but the nearest minute. But of course, we can go down to 30 or 10 seconds if you need to. And again, to implement these, going back to Contact Center Director here, let's say if I wanted to implement this waiting time as a secondary announcement, I would just click Add here on the side. I would choose our, oops, I need to refresh my page here. Make sure this is actually saved here as well. Yeah, it is. So going to our secondary announcements, we'll go ahead and add our announce wait time here. I'm going to go higher than 5 seconds here. We'll call this 20 seconds. And since I'm set to cycle all here, so now every 20 seconds while I'm waiting in queue, this script to announce my estimated wait time is going to run. And again, based on how the data is changing while they're waiting in queue, this wait time is going to be adjusted up or down. Again, it's always looking at the rolling past 30 minutes worth of data, call data coming in, and it's going to be recalculating this wait time based on that data coming in. And again, you could have potentially some, issues with this. Let's say let's say it's just before lunchtime. So I've got some people in queue. I have a number of agents who are just about to go on their lunch break. If they all of a sudden release suddenly, let's say now that the number of my number of available agents is cut in half, that's going to affect my wait time measurements, and they may hear kind of suddenly a longer wait time than they heard kind of 20 seconds ago, if that's the case. So just something to keep in mind. These queue positions and wait times are adjusted in real time by the system based on kind of the current activity. All right. Another very popular option we have for queue handling is our scheduled callback option. So this is a system that allows a caller waiting in queue to enter a callback number. We actually prompt them to enter the number they want to receive the callback on, and receive that call back from the system. The callbacks operate in two modes. We can do what we call a non-scheduled callback, which basically lets the caller keep their position in line. Or we can do a scheduled callback, where they can request a particular time. There are some gotchas surrounding that scheduled callback option that kind of make it a little less desirable. Mostly the fact that we don't have a way to prevent a caller from requesting a time when you might not be open. They can kind of put in a request, let's say for 11 p.m. or midnight or 1 a.m. and the system is going to accept that. But obviously, if no one's there to take the call, that call's not going to be made. So we usually recommend sticking with the non-scheduled callback, which lets them keep their place in queue, which is really what most people are looking for in many cases anyway. This particular callback action, it's invoked with, again, another special GCCS script action that's called collect callback info. And this one has some extra options associated with it as well that I'll show you here. So if I wanted to offer my callers a scheduled callback option, in my GCCS script, I'll create a new one here. We'll call it callback. For these, I'll usually use at least 2 actions. So in my palette here, the first action we usually use is this give menu. Give menu is essentially just an auto attendant, and the purpose of this is going to be so that when this script plays, what we're going to do is offer them the option to leave a callback, right? So in many cases, we're not going to be forcing them to enter their number and get a callback. We just want to present them the option. And the way that we do that is with this give menu. This is essentially an auto attendant. We can basically play a little prompt file here, which would be, thank you for continuing to hold. If you'd like to leave your number and request a callback, press 1 now. We can record that prompt file. And what we would do here is go ahead and put in our collect callback info action. And sort of like the arrow here, you'll notice with the give menu, I can hover over each of these little numbers here on the right and actually drag it over. So these are actually my different selection options. So I said, press 1. So it takes the 1 and drag this over to my callback info option. You don't have to configure anything for the others. Anything that's unconfigured, if they select it, it's going to present them basically with an error. And if you had configured this invalid file option, it would play that file to let them know their selection was not valid. And if it's invalid for too many times, what it's going to do, it's not going to hang up or anything. It's just going to stick them back in the queue. The same as if this timeout expired. Excuse me. Off there. If the timeout expired, again, it's just going to, and they haven't made a selection, it's just going to put them back in the queue. So we've given them the option with the give menu action here. And then we actually have this collect callback info. So I'm going to drag this up a little bit because there are some more options here. So again, this has 4 phases to getting their information, which are these 4 different tabs. So kind of phase 1 is we're going to get the destination. We're going to get the number that they want to receive the callback at. So we have a prompt here, the message that's going to play to ask them that information. We do, again, have a pre-made option here for us from Mitel. So that's located, again, in our language folder under sample. And you'll see all the files named CD underscore, so the callback underscore. And these are the recordings for the different options here. So in our case, this is going to be we're collecting the destination. So the first one we're going to start out with is this guy here. If you listen to this on your system, basically what it's going to say is please enter your telephone number, area code first. Basically ask them to enter a normally formatted North American phone number here. To make that work right, we do have to adjust this maximum number of digits. Generally speaking, I like to program this for 11 so that, in case someone enters 1 and the 10-digit number, we can accept that. I like to check off this variable number of digits less than maximum and use pound as the end digit. That corresponds to what is asked for in this sample recording. It'll basically ask them to enter their phone number and press pound when completed. The system can handle basically any valid number format. So if, for instance, they entered like a 7-digit number, the system is going to assume that they're in the local area code. It's going to dial the number that way. And if they enter a 10-digit or 11-digit number, then it'll dial that number as long distance. We do have a method to actually enforce good phone number hygiene, because obviously, someone could enter 3 digits or 8 digits or 9 digits, something that's not a real phone number. I'll show you here in a second. We do have a way to make sure that these numbers are valid. We can ask them for a retry. So maybe they did enter a number that's not right. We can give them an opportunity for multiple tries and then a timeout. At the bottom here, we have a checkbox for announce destination. This is one I always like to turn on. This will actually read the phone number that they entered back to them and ask them to verify that it's correct. So it'll do a read back. You can make sure that that's right. And again, we have a pre-configured prompt here for us, the cd readdest.wave file. And then the feedback prompt file is cd confirm or retry. So the cd readdest says, the number you entered is, then the system will read back the number. And then the feedback prompt says, press 1 to confirm or 2 to retry. And that's the digits we have configured here. 1 is our confirmation digit, 2 is our retry. Our next tab is this get time tab. And this is what I would configure if I was going to do a scheduled callback. So if I actually put some WAV files in here and I configure the stuff on this page, it's going to offer that caller the opportunity to request a particular time for their callback. If I don't want to use that, if I want to have this via just keep a place in queue, I'm just going to not configure anything on this tab. If I leave everything on this tab blank and unconfigured, it'll be as if it doesn't exist. So we're going to skip this guy. And now we're going to go to ending. And this is just the file that plays at the end of the process once they've confirmed their destination. A little bit of a comfort message saying, thank you, we've accepted your callback request, goodbye. And that's going to be the CD end. And then the last option is hang up. That's telling you, hey, once we're done collecting the digits here, we're going to hang up this call. So this is a basic callback request. And in fact, this is usually how we set up most of them. So I'm going to go here and save this script. Go back to Contact Center Director here. And now I'm going to go ahead and add it to my secondary announcements. I'll just use this callback test. And we'll say here 20 seconds again. And so yeah, so now here for this queue on my secondary announcements, you'll notice I still have my announce wait time. So when a caller enters the queue, what's actually going to happen is they're going to hear their wait time kind of right away. Is it's basically going to go down through the mandatory first and then straight to secondary. And it's going to immediately play whatever's configured first here. We're going to wait 20 seconds, and then we're going to give them the callback option, which again is going to present them the option for the callback. Ask them press 1 to enter that information. If they do press 1, then we'll go ahead and get them into that callback queue. And then we're going to hang up on them after they've entered that information. Or if they didn't select 1 for the callback, they're just going to be reinserted back into the queue, at which point we'll wait 20 more seconds before we start the secondary announcement over, in this case, since these are the only 2. Or if there was a third announcement here, we'd move on to that one. One other thing to note with the scheduled callbacks is we do have a scheduled callbacks tab here on the service. And this is where we can set up a few different options here. The main one that we usually turn on, as I mentioned before, if I wanted to enforce some validation for the number being entered, this numbering plan drop down here, if we set that to North American, it's going to basically enforce a 10-digit number be entered there, 10 or 11. So if you do have this set to North American, just know that the system's going to, in that case, not accept a 7-digit number, only a 10 or 11-digit. And it does have to be in North American format. You won't be able to enter international numbers. So if you do have a case where you have international callers or something like that, you want to use a callback, just set this to none. We can set a window for attempting a callback. Again, this is more applicable to the scheduled callback option, but if a callback does get scheduled in the system, let's say somebody requests a callback for tomorrow, today, we can still attempt that within this, in this case, default 48-hour window. And of course, a few other options here. Another popular one with the scheduled callbacks is the require agent confirmation. This will actually require that an agent confirm that they're ready to take this call before they accept it. We usually turn this on just to give the agents a little peace of mind. To them, this looks like a call ringing in still. And in a scheduled callback scenario, that's probably for the best. In some other scenarios, though, it's the server's calling the customer, the server's also calling the agent, and then it's connecting them together. Depending on the type of call center that you're running and your agent training, you might want your agents to answer differently, knowing that we're making the call back to them versus answering a call that the customer placed. But usually for something like a non-scheduled callback, it's usually pretty safe to leave that unchecked. Another one that's popular above that, the run script before transferring to agent, we can configure, again, another brief voice announcement that we can play to the caller, actually. So this script is something that's going to be played to the caller that says something like, thank you, this is xyz.com returning your call. Please hold while we connect you to an agent. So it's another place we can run a little comfort message during the callback process when they're about to be connected to an agent, just reminding them that, hey, we're calling you back and we're going to connect you to someone now. Okay. Finally, one of our last kind of simple queue options here is abandoned callback. Abandoned callbacks will automatically call back any caller who hangs up while they're in queue. There's no GCCS script associated with this. It's just a simple kind of on-off option back in the service. But for certain business cases, this might be desirable. For instance, if you have a team that's maybe working collections or something like that, people you really need to get a hold of, certain kind of sales instances, it's going to be desirable to actually call someone back if they hang up. The abandoned callback can do that. Important thing to note there is basically just we're going to be calling back anyone who hangs up based on their caller ID. So obviously, if they're calling from a business or some other shared number, something that's not going to reach them directly when you call it back, that's what's going to happen. So, if I were to call into a queue from Verteks here, I hang up, we have this abandoned callback turn on, I'm not going to get the call back. The main number at Verteks is. So, again, this is a little bit sort of an edge case kind of feature, but there are definitely some scenarios where it's useful. And to configure it, it's actually here back in the service in contact center director. One tab over from scheduled callbacks, we have abandoned callbacks. And again, this is just kind of an on-off checkbox. So if I check abandoned callbacks enabled, hit save there, it's going to be turned on. We do have a few settings here. The main one here for abandons is a little bit of a timer here. So callback if call abandoned after X number of seconds. So basically, we can prevent calls that are too short from being called back. There might be cases where it's just a wrong number, or some instance where they got in and hung up immediately. I think industry statistics or something like over 60% of all abandons occur like within the first 10 seconds of entering a queue or something. We might not want to call those people back, so we can give ourselves a little time here. So in this case, I would have had to have been waiting for at least 30 seconds before hanging up to get a call back through this system. And again, we've got our same run script before transferring to agent and require agent confirmation steps here. For abandoned callbacks, I probably would definitely recommend the require agent confirmation, or make sure that my agents do have the ability to see the in the agent interaction center the type of call coming into them, so that they know if it's going to be a regular call or an abandoned callback that they're about to get into. So those are our kind of most popular options for queue handling with announcements here. Again, as I mentioned in the beginning, we do have the full power of the scripting engine behind all this, so we can come up with some pretty interesting and complex scripts or scenarios here, again, depending on the business case or need, involving database dips or, multiple different types of callbacks or diverting callbacks to different groups. Kind of all that's within our ability to program. So definitely if you want to implement something a little bit maybe more out of the box for your queues, you can definitely reach out to us and we'd be happy to help kind of scope that out and get it set up and working for you. But I think that was all I had to bring to the table today. So we'll open it up to you guys for any questions that you might have, or if not, we'll call it an afternoon. And thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.
All right, that looks like it's it, guys. We thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.